Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. It's nice to see you this morning. The local time is 7:48 a.m. Pacific time, and today's date is Saturday, January 11th of 2025. Looks like we're loud and clear, thank you. Hope everything's going well with you. Let me give you a shot out the window. We have a beautiful morning with actual breeze. Actual breeze. So I think it's been weeks, maybe a couple of months since we've had some fresh air stirring in this valley. It's been stagnant, stale air, freezing fog, the whole thing. So for me personally, it's very uplifting to walk out of the house. And in fact, Bijou wanted to be out in the backyard at dark 30, screwing around. And I think maybe it's just because there was a different feeling outside for him as well. So feeling great this morning, and hopefully Liz and I will head over to Frenchman Coulee today and take a stroll and enjoy the sunshine and the fresh air. So, that's the vibe here. Can I say hi to a number of you? We have 350 live viewers already at 7:50 a.m. Of course, if you're watching this in the future, we'll start this in about 10 minutes or so. This is just a little pre-show, a little warm-up, saying hi to folks live. Corvallis, Oregon. Cretaceous, Texas. Highland, Michigan. Disturbed Belt, Alberta. That's Alberta Gary. Hello. Browns Point, Washington. Paul. Is that the Tacoma area? It seems I ask that every time, Paul. I never quite get a response. I should look it up. Vancouver, Washington. That's the Portland, Oregon area. Down to live. Ian is deep in the Chuckanut. Jack says Warren, Maine. Hello, Jack. Troutdale, Oregon. Snowy, Boone, North Carolina. There's a Canadian flag from Janet. Boulder, Colorado. Port Townsend, Washington. Jeff Tepper, good morning, with your volcano erupting icon. Very sophisticated there. Nice job, Jeff. Pat the pilot from Natchez says, hello. Don in Los Angeles. Don, how's everything going down there? I know you're a retired firefighter. Have you been enlisted somehow, or can you report? We're concerned about you down there. And many of your fellow Los Angelinos, of course. Michael from Trim, Ireland. Hello. Woke-ass Messiah says good morning from Eugene, Oregon. Bill's in Bastrop, Texas, y'all. Jennifer's watching in San Jose, California. Kevin in Hermiston, Oregon. Gabriella is in the south of Paris, France. That's French. Hello, Gabriella. Thank you for joining us live. Draftsman is in Lyle, Washington. Warm us up, he says. Jim's in Chico, California. John's in Kelowna, British Columbia. Lancashire, UK. Sweden. Jurassic Coast, Dorset, UK. Stephen Cook says, good morning from Missoula, Montana, where it's 35 degrees Fahrenheit. That's exactly what we have here, too. But it sure feels different here. Bryce is in Cobar, New South Wales, Australia. Stonyford, California. Kirk's in Philomath, Oregon. No herky-jerky, says Mike. I don't know. We'll test that. I'll do my little walk. And I did swap cameras. So this is the camera that was on the shelf. In fact, it's still called shelf cam. This was the camera that was in the window. So I don't know. That's as far as my experimentation goes without Nat the Wonder Boy. A few more hellos, and then I have a quick announcement before we start this morning. Bryce, you're not in Tasmania anymore. Where are you now? Or did I already read your location? John says hi from Tigard, Oregon. That's the Portland, Oregon area. Gabriella in Paris says she would not miss this for the world. Wow, okay. Thank you. Tom is in. Tom says that the sun is going down in Arnhem, the Netherlands. Well, the sun is just coming up here. It's funny how that works, Tom. Elko, Nevada. That's Patrick. Boyd is in Boise. Kelsey says top of the morning from St. Pete, Florida. Hamlin, Germany. Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Chelmsford, England. Plenty of overseas folks. I think I saw in the replay, I loved it. I think in the replay of the last show, somebody said they were watching live on an airplane over India, heading for, I forget where, in Southeast Asia. That was cool, to have live viewers on an airplane. We're living in an amazing time. Okay. Great. Let me go to Docky and show you one thing. I saw a couple people asking about this, so let's just go ahead and be clear about it. Some of you enjoy the Friday at noon lecture series that we have here on campus, and special thanks to those of you who have contributed specifically to support bringing in speakers here on this campus on Friday. And if you're unaware, we do this on occasional Fridays during the academic year, and Mike Eddy will be here in May in person. So you can come and meet him and listen to him talk for real. I don't know if he's going to talk about green M&Ms or not, but whatever. Anyway, this is the lineup that Hannah Shamloo and I have put together for this current winter quarter, and you'll notice that our first Friday talk is not until Friday, January 24th. But you'll also notice, and I'm letting you know that if you want to mark your calendars for noon on these Fridays, noon Pacific time, to watch a live stream, or if you want to come and sit in for real, in person, if the weather's cooperative, once we start on Friday, January 24th, we'll go 5 talks in 6 weeks, I guess. The only Friday we'll take off is for Valentine's Day because we're all romantics here. What? So boom, 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 3 Fridays in a row, and then boom, boom, 2 more Fridays in a row. And you'll notice, if you can read the print, that these are all CWU professors, except Sean is a CWU graduate who works down in Tri-Cities, Washington. But we have Tim Melbourne, Chris Mattinson, Ann Egger, and Paul Winbury, all from our department here on campus. So that's what's happening with the Friday Speaker Series. I purposely didn't start the Friday series talks until late January because I wasn't sure what was going to happen with Liz, but things are going very well. A couple final hellos, and then I will give you a shout out the window, do some hot mic, and take my little walk. Good morning, everyone, says Scott. Packed house. Yeah, more than 500 viewers now. Newport Beach, California. Prosser, Washington. Ogden, Utah. Seattle, that's Monica. Hello, Monica. Starlink being added to commercial flights. Oh, okay. Yeah, very good. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and we will start in 5 minutes. Hot mic. Okay. What are you going to do today? You're going to start with the Klarno. So to set up the Klarno, how are you going to get into it? You might do your new prop. Yeah, you're going to do your new prop right away. I think that is that what you should do? Yep. You go to your new prop right away. Then you go to the Klarno clips with Jason, and then you know the rest. The slides are all set up for you. But it's thinking about the prop right away. The new prop will hit that early, and that will set the tone for the rest of this episode. That's right. Okay, you got it. Take your walk. You got your keys? Okay, go. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA, home of Central Washington University. I'm your host, Ned Zentner, and today is the third of 3 Ridge Migration episodes. We've been deep into the topic, and the first message this morning is, it's been fun, but we need to wrap it up. So there's plenty of new content this morning, including the Clarno, with a video that I did yesterday with Jason McClowery from Baker City, Oregon. We'll go to some strike slip data from Mike Eddy and the Dream Team up in the North Cascades. We'll eventually go out to the Pacific Basin, talk about the Hawaiian hotspot seamount chain and how that has anything to do with the craziness happening in the Pacific Northwest around 50 million years ago. And then I'm not sure where we will finish, but we have to finish so that we're ready for the early days of the Cascades Volcanic Arc, which is where we go next couple of episodes. So, Tadaki, let's get into it. Yes, here we are on Saturday, January 11th. It feels like spring out there. We have sun, we have chirping birds, we have breeze. I mean, it's only 35 degrees, but it feels like we've turned the corner in a weird way. I've missed the sun so badly. So feeling great this morning. And the next time I see you will be Thursday, January 16th. Of course, we do Thursdays and Saturdays. You certainly know that by now. To get us into this, I want to help us realize that we are still in blue. We're about to initiate the Cascade Volcanic Arc. But I've got a new way that dawned on me last night that may help if you feel like you're still struggling a bit with these concepts. And I don't have to guess that some of you are struggling. The number of emails continue to pour in from you, the viewers. Many are energized. Some are frustrated. There's a tone with some of you that it's like, I don't see this, and you're getting a little bit agitated about it. Or why aren't you talking more about the Yellowstone mantle plume, or some sort of weird vibe. So that's another sign that we need to move on. Like we're stewing too much in this, I guess, for some of you. But I've done what I can to set the tone, to talk about a celebration, blah, blah, blah. You've got it by now, I hope. And if you don't, I guess you won't. So let's go to a brand new way that is, I think, kind of minor, but it might do it for you. It might do it for you. So let's show my latest little prop. So this isn't new. We've been talking about a subducting spreading ridge, which is a divergent plate boundary. And when we have that, we have a green M&M marking the triple junction. And then inboard from that, we have a near trench magma. We've been wondering about why those near trench magmas are happening. It's typically a cold place. It's kind of weird. You should have a magmatic system when you have a dipping ocean plate deep enough. But why in this cold place with a bunch of thick piles of sandstones, basically you've got magmas forming in a cold sandbox? Why? Well, one way to do it is to have a migrating triple junction through the area. So does this work? This is the new way to talk about the same stuff we've been working on for the last couple of days. What is the difference between Mike Eddy's model and Jeff Tepper's model? Those are the two main characters that we've had the last few episodes. What's the main difference? Well, let me start with the similarity. Both Mike and Jeff have a green M&M migrating north up the margin of the Pacific Northwest. Is it herky-jerky? Is it a smooth migration? Who gives a shit? All right, it's a migration to the north. The key difference is the timing of it. The timing of the green movement, the timing of the M&M going north up the margin. So does this work for you? Here's the green M&M. Here's the spreading ridge. It's subducting beneath the Pacific Northwest. And let's just get this map out of here. And north of the spreading ridge is the Kula plate. And south of the spreading ridge is the Farallon plate. And I think all agree that if you reconstruct those vectors of those two oceanic plates, they're not perfectly parallel to each other. There's a bit more of a northward trajectory of the Kula plate, cartoonishly. So I purposely did these not perfectly parallel to each other and not perfectly parallel to the spreading ridge. Otherwise, it wouldn't even be a spreading ridge. It would just be a transform boundary. Okay, well, here's what I think may work. What we're trying to decide is which plate was subducting 46 million years ago to start making Cascade volcanoes, the Cascade Volcanic Arc. And if you're Jeff Tepper from University of Puget Sound, you say, we have to wait until the Farallon plate gets immediately offshore of Washington to start the volcanic arc 46 million years ago. So in other words, Jeff Tepper, and you'll see the same diagrams again in just a second on the slideshow, but Jeff Tepper says, get this M&M into Washington by 46, please, so that we can get the Farallon to subduct and make the volcanic arc. Mike Eddy says, yeah, I want to bring the green M&M north too, man. But Mike Eddy says, I need the green M&M to be in southern Oregon as recently as 40 million years ago. And we're going to look at evidence beyond near trench magmas to see why Mike is saying that. But Mike says, I want to do the same thing, but I don't want to do it until 40. And so if we go 46 million years ago and we start these volcanoes, the volcanic arc in Washington, and Mike agrees, these guys need to start 46 million years ago, Mike says, I need the green M&M to be down in southern Oregon. And so this is the Kula plate that's subducting to make these volcanoes. And then 46, 45, 44, 43, 42, even 40 maybe, it's still Kula. And Mike Eddy says, by the time we get to 35 million years ago, I need the spreading ridge to be north, and then go ahead, knock yourself out with the Farallon plate subducting. But Mike says, I want that green M&M further south later. I want the green M&M in Oregon later than Mike does, than Jeff does. Damn it, I had it to the last 3 words. We'll keep working on it, but that's the newest attempt to try to have you see it. Let's not belabor it, because some of you saw it 2 episodes ago and you're getting impatient with me. But I know from all the feedback and reading the live chat in replay that not everybody's seeing it. Okay, so one last comment then. So yes, this business about a delayed green M&M going north from Mike Eddy is because he interprets these near trench magmas in Oregon as being subducting spreading ridge and not Yellowstone mantle plume. Pretty much everybody else thinks that this is mostly a Yellowstone mantle plume story and not a subducting spreading ridge story. I say pretty much everybody else because I talked to this guy Jason McClowry yesterday, and he had some interesting things to say, and he knows Eastern Oregon geology better than pretty much anybody. And if you want to go to the website, and if you haven't been, where are we? Go to the video library. This was added yesterday. I did this Friday morning and enjoyed my visit with Jason, so much so that I hope he can come back and we can continue as we get younger in the alphabet. But that Jason McClowry interview is there waiting for you. We're going to look at a couple of excerpts from that today. Are there any new papers? Nope. This is the second episode in a row where I just keep shuffling papers. And we're focusing primarily on the Eocene Dikes paper and the Ridge Subduction paper, both co-authored by Mike Eddy, but Bob Miller's the lead author. So if you've been overwhelmed by papers, you're getting a break. I'm not loading a bunch of new papers on you, students. And if you're overwhelmed by the number of videos to watch, you don't have to watch anything. You don't have to watch anything. You don't have to do anything. But yeah, I've been in the zone, and am I starting to get burned out? Not really. But I'm ready to, I think, move on to another color and move on to maybe what I was originally imagining for the alphabet. I didn't imagine that the first half of the alphabet would be pre-Cascade volcanic arc, but that's what it turned out to be. By the end of today's episode, we are officially halfway through the alphabet. So there's a nice symmetry that the first 13 episodes in this series are pre-46, and then starting on Thursday, the next episode, we're going to be cranking up the subduction factory, and we're going to start looking at these magmas from the early days of the Cascades. But we're really not to what I thought I was going to be doing. I thought it was going to be mostly the last I thought it was mostly Cascade volcanic arc, and we'd be working with all these hundreds of formation names and trying to group them by color and just try to pull out some stories. That's coming, but it's been a very pleasant diversion recently to get into this ridge migration stuff. But I think I'm ready once we're done today. So quit talking, get going so that we can finish and get to the early days of the Cascades by the end of this episode. That's me talking to myself. Okay, great. Let's go to the slideshow and see what I have lined up for myself. And, okay, so did the new way of teaching it with the pieces of paper help you finally see why Mike wants the Kula subducting and Jeff wants the Farallon? Maybe, maybe not. And baked into that difference then is Mike leaning heavily towards a slab window that's migrating, Jeff Tepper leaning heavily towards a breakoff belt responsible for many of those magmas that have chemistries that suggest that the slab is absent. Now, the slab is absent here, the slab is absent here. Both models are trying to explain these non-arc magmas generally. But there's also plenty of similarities, which I think you can see now. One more time, Jeff Tepper with a northward migrating. Notice the timing now. He's already, 50 million years ago, he's already got his M&M on the way north. Right? If it ever was in Southern Oregon, it's not in Southern Oregon anymore, according to Tepper's model. And interestingly, Jeff, I know you're in the live chat right now. This is one of your key graphics from 2019 when I first visited that poster session and caught wind of what you were up to. And interestingly, Jason McClowry reminded us in that video yesterday that he was also standing there. Jeff, you do have a green M&M at the southern margin of Silesia. And you do have the Kula and Farallon. So 49 million years ago, you've got it in Southern Oregon, I guess. But you just want that thing moving north sooner than that. I've not emphasized enough probably that the Farallon plate was a major plate, and much of it was continuing its subduction south of Southern Oregon. And that's a whole nother story that we're not getting into here, but a big age sweep across Nevada and so on. But back to Jeff Tepper's maps and Ken Clark as well. We have our migrating green M&M to the north, and it's not until this thing crosses the Columbia and gets into Washington, you know what I mean. Yeah, even Jeff says it, right? So it's not until we cross and get the Farallon into Washington proper that we're going to fire off and start making the Cascade volcanic arc. Okay, to the papers, because it was Tepper that suggested, hey, maybe I should talk to Jason McClowry about the Clarno formation down in Oregon and just see if he's got some reaction to these two models. And I don't think Jason's been watching the series. But he's nimble enough to react to whatever was said. And so if I remind you all about the breakoff belt, I wanted to ask Jason, and I did ask Jason McClowry from the basically Oregon Geological Survey, is the Clarno magma seen down there, the Clarno lavas, are they part of this breakoff belt down into Oregon? And I was asking that because I wanted to extend Tepper's story into Oregon as we go, we realize that there's so much young volcanic cover that it's hard to follow the break-off belt and hard to follow the narratives to the north. But I not only wanted to know if the Klarno was a southward connection to Tepper's model and narratives about the rollback and the breakoff and everything else, I also got more and more interested recently in how much the Yellowstone mantle plume is dramatically influencing the Eocene geology in Oregon. And should we keep thinking about the mantle plume influencing those rocks? And so I'm setting up the 2 video clips with Jason. Here's one way to do it. This is today. And here's the Klarno, this weird little island down here where we have everything in Washington that we've been studying, so Washington-centric. Here's this lonely little Klarno down here by itself. Does it tap into some of the narratives that we've been talking about? And I think most everybody agrees the Klarno is part of this Chalice magma outbreak, but it's been misunderstood, as Jason McLaury says. Even in this map that got me confused and then stimulated to do 3 ridge migration shows, even in this thing, the Klarno is on the map. Well, it's amazing what you don't notice when you first look at it. I was so obsessed over here. So the Klarno is showing up in this narrative, and Mike Eddy is going to have a spreading ridge down here at 48 million years ago in the neighborhood of the Klarno. Jason McLaury, let's go to him. He started with a map, or early on, he started with a map, a beautiful map drawn by Paul Hammond, one of his former mentors. And I'm sorry to report that Dr. Paul Hammond passed away a few days ago, here in early January of 2025, was about to turn 96. And Paul Hammond, Portland State University, will be a major character when we get into the 20s, the roaring 20s for sure. So condolences to the Hammond family, and the legacy of Paul Hammond will continue for decades, and we will understand in short order later this month how important his work has been over the years. So here's a Hammond map. And we're zeroing in on the Klarno. By the way, I was staring at this over breakfast this morning. What is this? Again, this is Paul Hammond, I think 2010 is what Jason said. There's a gray arrow here, point of continental overpassage. And so I understand what this means. Paul Hammond is saying in 2010 that he sees North America crossing the Yellowstone mantle plume, point of continental overpassage, at Cape Mendocino, essentially. But he's got another one of these things up here. Is Paul Hammond on this map saying that there's been this much rotation to have the original rocks that were here 42 million years ago now at the mouth of the Columbia? I think he is. This is the Tillamook and the Grays River, so I may come back to this, but I'm ahead of myself a little bit. Yeah, if you look at, we're going to get to Jason. Weirdly, we're back to Merle Beck, who also passed away in January a few years ago. We're back to Merle Beck, the guy who was doing the pioneering paleomagnetic studies and the father of Baja, BC. Remember that from 2-3 winters ago? I mean, Merle was publishing on rotation in the Eocene as well, and Merle Beck, and then followed up with Ray Wells. These guys say, yeah, we have 50 million years of clockwise rotation. The paleomagnetic studies show us that there's a degree of rotation around the clock every million years for 50 frickin' million years. So Paul Hammond did sketch this out for me on the back of a napkin at a GSOC meeting, 10 years ago. I'm reignited to, especially now that Paul has passed, to go back and study that a little bit more. Okay, anyway, let's get to Jason. Come on, man. What are you doing?
Diagrams and some maps. Verbally, what time window are we talking about with the
Klarno.
best dates that you have so far from the Klarno?
So that's kind of the interesting part that's come out with the Klarno is most of the old literature and older ages that have come out about that, I think, leads to the Klarno being misunderstood. And so there's two phases to the Klarno. Really, there's an early episode that starts about 53.5 million years ago, may extend to as young as 45. These are some interesting composition rocks, these alkaline to peralkaline type rocks. They formed little erosional knobs through parts of Central Oregon around the town of Mitchell. And then we've recognized over the top of that, there's about a 1.5 million year break. And then at 44 million up to about 40, there's some more traditional subduction-like volcanics that erupt and mantle that older stratigraphy. It's all known as the Klarno here, but I would now break it out into the early Klarno and late Klarno. So we're starting to recognize at least two phases.
The two phases. Okay, so that's a narrative we've been working on. We're using the number up here in Washington, 46 million years ago, as the start of the classic Cascade volcanic arc, as per Jeff Tepper's designation. Are you seeing early Klarno is pre-volcanic arc and late Klarno is the volcanic arc has fired up?
Yes, it would appear to have that relationship. And I think there's one more piece to the Klarno here. As we go east, we find Klarno type rocks that may extend to ages as young as 33 million years old. And these would overlap with what's classically been known across the Blue Mountains as the John Day Formation. So we're finding younger ages as well, but that kind of arc start, this 44 to 43 million year old age in the Klarno, is pretty consistent what we see with rocks in the Western Cascades, where we see the onset of volcanism. So that stratigraphy near Eugene in Western Oregon along the east edge of the Willamette Valley, the oldest rocks in the classic Western Cascades there are about 44. The earliest ash flow tuff eruptions that kind of we've dated and marked the base of that right around 42 million. So that's kind of our constraints. They're of comparison.
Okay, super helpful. The narratives we have going up here in Washington appear to be happening in Oregon as well. And you're like, see, I knew it. You should have been down in Oregon all this time. There's all sorts of parallels down in Oregon. I agree to a point. Like Jason can help us see some of this, but the premise that most of these older stories are buried holds. Remember, in the North Cascades, everything's in front of God and everybody. We get to southern Washington Cascades, most of that basement and swamp and other things are buried by younger lavas. And we get down to Oregon, and the Klarno is one of our only windows to really see this time frame. But we're there, and what I'm hinting at right now is, what do you think about Mike Eddy's spreading ridge so late in southern Oregon, Jason? Oh, before I did that, I asked for a few images from him, and he shared this timeline that I love. So here's millions of years on the left, 55, 45, 35 million years ago, 30 million years ago. Here's our friend Siletzia, yes, down in Oregon as well. Here are these near trench magmas, quote unquote, which most everybody attributes to the Yellowstone mantle plume slipping underneath North America starting 42 million years ago. That was the last show. And that these are these isolated bullet holes through Siletzia where we get these near trench magmas. So these near trench magmas are not coming up through sandstone, they're coming up through Siletzia itself. But I think what Mike Eddy is wondering is, are these more spreading ridge near trench magmas and not Yellowstone mantle plume near trench magmas? And here's the early Klarno and the late Klarno, the pre-arc and the early days of the Cascade Arc stories in eastern Oregon. So I forgot I did this. Sorry. So here's a Bob Miller, Mike Eddy map. This is today. There is a green M&M on the map. I thought it was further north up in southeast Alaska, but it's right here. I guess I didn't realize that. I should, but I don't think about that area much. So we're not even up to Hattagawai, and we've got Juan de Fuca here. But Michael Eddy says, 48 million years ago, I want the green M&M in southern Oregon, and the Clarno is, like if we're subducting this ridge, I wondered if Jason had thoughts about, did he know about this model and what did he think about it? And then by 42, the green M&M from Mike Eddy's model gets us to the Washington line, and then by 35, it's up here. Jason, what do you think about this Mike Eddy model?
That model was presented in that 2023 Geosphere paper. It is interesting, and I think it has some legs to it in that it may explain, the isolated or restricted occurrence of things like the Tillamook Grace Harbor. Yes, I like that. I think the timing of that also begins to answer some of the varieties of Clarno that we're seeing as this spreading center potentially comes into Oregon and starts to cause these instabilities inboard in intraplate volcanism. And so some of the timing of this is intriguing because it may explain some of the early Clarno volcanism and some of the changes to, more classic subduction-like volcanism later. Some of the timing of this model seems to be very in line with the geochronology of the Clarno.
Interesting. Well, let's go with that for just a second. Since you've spent many years in the field in Eastern Oregon, one of Mike's arguments is in the North Cascades, he's got these strike-slip faults all either initiating or at least accelerating in a dextral manner starting about 50 when Silesia arrives. And then much of that activity is just going incredibly fast, this strike-slip action and trans-tension and everything in the North Cascades of Washington and up into BC. And then that stuff shuts down at 35 million years ago. How, of the strike-slip faults that you've mapped or anybody's mapped in Eastern Oregon around Clarnotine, are there any strike-slip faults, number one? What's the initiation or the earliest documented dextral motion down there, which would be an additional way to argue for a spreading ridge that far south?
That is a really excellent question. And I noticed in some of the diagrams in the Geosphere paper that showed potentially some of these strike-slip faults extending down into Northeast Oregon. Those are well documented, certainly in the early Miocene rocks in the Columbia River basalt. Earlier than that, across the blues, it's been really difficult to recognize those, and not many of them have been mapped. And this actually leads to one of the issues that we've been dealing with. So a lot of my work over the last 10 years has been with my graduate advisor from WSU, Dave Gaylord, and he and I have been interested in some of the volcanogenic sedimentary rocks in the Clarno. So we have really thick sequences of these that were eroding from some of the volcanic centers, particularly in the eastern Clarno, and depositing in fairly deep depot basin. And this idea goes back to Paul Robinson in the early 90s and James White that had detailed some of that stratigraphy on the middle fork of John Day and talked about this model of isolated Clarno volcanoes around with adjacent basins that sediment was going into. But one of the things we haven't been able to see or explain is how are these basins developing?
Right.
Does potentially strike-slip faulting create, this trans-tension, pull-apart basins that might explain some of this? That's why it's a really good question. This is one of the things we're trying to find is what are the margins of these basins and what was controlling deposition of these sedimentary rocks. I was intrigued by seeing that on some of the diagrams. It leads
Yeah.
us to new possibilities, and maybe some explanation of how we're getting these deposits.
Well, that's a potentially very interesting connection because I've got this gimmick here this winter, and we're kind of working with decades here. So between 49 and 40 million years ago, we're just calling it the 40s. And up here in my neighborhood, the Chumstick Basin near Wenatchee, Washington, plenty of work done by Erin Donaghy, a former student of Paul Umhofer, and Mike Eddy. She's got just what you're talking about in the 40s, where this basin is just opening up. There's dextral motion, transtension, and this incredible amount of sediment, mostly Arcotic sandstone. There's some tuffs piling up in this thing as well.
Yeah. Seems like we're on a tangent, but we are not. So let me go to my newest gimmick to add some faults, in case I'm losing a few of you now. We're transitioning away from the near trench magma data, and we're going to inboard, in other words, away from the trench, data on strike-slip faults and how Mike Eddy ultimately is also using the geochronology on the strike-slip faults to also be a major reason that he needs the Kula plate offshore and not the Farallon. Let's try it. So if you followed this, if this worked for you, I don't know if it works for you, but it kind of works for me, I have to say. I'm kind of pleased with it. Can I say it a different way? 50 million years ago, Jeff Tepper and Ken Clark are fine with this. But Tepper and Clark say 46 and then 40, let's say. And Mike Eddy says, I kind of want the opposite. If we're 51, I want the green M&M here. I want to get this thing way down here by 48. And if that's a sudden jump, that's fine. But Mike says, I need this thing down here. And I'm putting words now in Mike Eddy's mouth. Okay, maybe the near trench magmas down here in Oregon, maybe they are Yellowstone mantle plume. Maybe they're not subducting ridges for sure. But Mike Eddy says, I've also been studying strike-slip faults. The Straight Creek Fault, the Leavenworth Fault, the Eniot Fault, the Ross Lake Fault Zone. And what we were just talking about with Jason McClowery are similar strike-slip faults down here in north central and northeastern Oregon. The Dream Team has been working on these faults, and they say between 50 and 35 million years ago, these faults are just going apeshit. And it's dextral, meaning that there's right lateral motion. And it's really going great guns, 50 to 45, but it's still going great guns as young as 35. And Mike Eddy in his model says, I need this Kula plate to be going crazy to the north to drive that motion. And I'm going to kill this whole set of strike-slip faults if I can get this green M&M way to the north, because the Farallon is not driving north nearly as much as the Kula is. And so that's why I was asking Jason about this, and it doesn't sound like they have data like we have in the North Cascades. But if the same kind of acceleration or even initiation of strike-slip faulting in eastern Oregon is also in this time frame, then that's even more evidence for Mike Eddy's model. We're transitioning to the strike-slip faulting, but it's not a major left turn. It's just the same set of ideas with positioning the M&M, but we're getting away from the magmas and now going to the strike-slip fault models. Okay, I got to pick up the pace. Yeah, so 48 million years ago, if the green M&M is down here, here's all these strike slip faults that are one of the papers that you have today. And interestingly, I'm just noticing right now, they're dashing them into the Clarno area. So that could be an area of new work where Jason McClowery teams up with Mike Eddy or Jeff Tepper, all these guys, and they do a kind of a structural continuation and an igneous continuation. I think Jeff Tepper likes the Clarno being part of the rollback. So yeah, it's thinking about this story, but it's more than just the near trench magmas that are driving the story, as Jeff Tepper will tell you as well. To remind you how I got into this, let's watch this clip again that I showed you 2 or maybe even 3 letters ago. But now that we've been thinking about this so hard, maybe hearing this clip again will mean more to you. If I do near trench magmas, I think this is the show on Thursday. I think I need to put it in now. And that will get me into the Grays River and the Tillamook, and suddenly we've got the subducting spreading ridge down in Oregon. Now I'm surprised that you said that. I thought you were against that versus Mike's view.
I want to say I'm not against near trench magmas.
Yeah.
And near trench magma is a geographic description of an event. It doesn't necessarily tell you what ridge was there or why there was melting there.
Okay.
So, like the Mount Pilchuck stock, which I've put in the breakoff belt, and I think Mike and others would include with the near trench magmas.
He does.
It is near the trench. I don't think there's any disagreement about that. It's unusually far toward the trench. It just, we have a different reason for thinking why there's melting near the trench. We both agree that it's related to some sort of break in the slab. The question is whether it's a spreading ridge or a tear. The Grays River and the Tillamook, those are younger. So the Cascades was already underway when those were erupting. But they're erupting in the forearc, between the arc and the trench. So you need to have some unusually hot conditions to allow melting to happen in a place which is usually cold. So usually that region of territory between the trench and the arc is a cold place because you've got a cold slab being subducted under the edge of the continent.
For your story, go ahead. Sorry.
So to have melting out there is unusual. And one way to do that is with a slab window, because then you're putting a heat source, a spreading ridge, right underneath that edge. And I think that's what happened. I think that's what happened. It's just a younger spreading ridge. The spreading ridge has been offset by transforms. And so the ridge can basically jump southward each time you subduct a transform. We might want to draw this at some point.
Yeah, well, maybe that's worth it, because I am confused right now. I can't see how we can have Farallon plate subducting to make Tamanous rock and Granite Falls and that sort of thing at the same time as having a spreading ridge down in southern Oregon. So that's how we got into this. It's been fun. We're going to start pulling back out for the rest of today's episode. We'll do a little bit more with the North Cascades team and those faults, but I don't want to belabor it. Then we're going to zoom out to the entire Pacific Basin, and then we'll call it good. And we'll move on to the early days of the Cascades. Sunlight is really coming through now. We've got a beautiful bluebird day. Okay? That was a little break. You ready? Let's dig in again. Right, sketch pencil with M&M. I think I just did that. I don't need to do it again. Are we still on the near trench magma thing? I'm just reminding you that there's different ways. These are near trench magmas, like at Mount Pilchuck and Bald Mountain, but is it really subducting spreading ridge, or is it a break off, or a combination somehow? So I zoomed in a little bit more on Gary Paul's photographs. Gary's up in Holden Village in the middle of winter for some reason, so he let me know that he wouldn't be live for these last couple of episodes, but more Gary Paul photos coming down the road. But you know our blue for the 40s, and these turn out to be important places, Pilchuck and Bald Mountain, and these are just a couple of the near trench magmas that have been the focal point to this point. Yeah, we don't need that. We don't need this. We've got it. Mike Eddy, southward, move on. Yes, it's strike-slip faults in addition to the magmas that Mike is leaning heavily into. This is an interesting passage from 2017, Mike Eddy. Ultimately, recognizing the record of ridge-trench interaction in plate margin sedimentary basins requires a multidisciplinary approach that synthesizes a region's magmatic, structural, and depositional history. In isolation, none of the indicators of this process, like near-trench magmatism, changes to fault kinematics, geochemically anomalous magmatism in the arc and back arc and basin disruption, end quote, provide conclusive evidence for this tectonic setting. However, together, they may provide strong evidence for the presence of a triple junction. So Jeff Tepper is a well-rounded geologist for sure, but he admits once he gets away from igneous geology, he has less expertise. He's admitted that openly. One of the things I like about Mike Eddy is he's a lab rat. He knows how to run these high-precision pieces of equipment and do chemistry, basically, at Purdue. But he's also this Renaissance man where he's out mapping faults. He's doing stuff with sedimentary basins, structural, all sorts of plate geometries, as you'll see with another clip from Mike Eddy. So there's an incredible variety of tools that Mike Eddy has that maybe help with this particular dilemma that we find ourselves in. For instance, if we're going back to one of Mike Eddy's slides, and you have them at the nickzentner.com website, here he is emphasizing that when you have Kula offshore, you have major amounts of translation on strike-slip faults. And so if you have the Kula plate much further south in Washington, here are the faults firing off in response to that, the Straight Creek Fault and these others. I don't want to get bogged down. This is the dream team. This is going back 3 winters now. And by the way, I am going to meet up with these 3 people one last time at the end of their dream team grant in August. We're going to make a video together in the North Cascades someplace to kind of summarize their whole project. I look forward to that. More Gary Paul photographs. Now just reminding you, well, you remember the Golden Horn. That's our breakoff featured player from Jeff Tepper's work, but the Golden Horn was also a major part of the PhD of Mike Eddy. But the Ross Lake Fault Zone is one of these major strike-slip fault zones that fires up at 50 million years ago. The Leavenworth Fault Zone near Wenatchee, not far away from Ellensburg. Here's Mount Stewart. So Ellensburg, Bijou is right over the ridge to the south. These structures are also firing up, the Eniat Fault and the Leavenworth Fault, all at about the same time. And Mike keeps saying, I need the Kula offshore to explain this rapid right lateral motion. I don't want to get bogged down. Eniat Fault, Leavenworth Fault. I don't want to get bogged down. Chelan Block, Wenatchee Block. You're like, slow down. This is all new to me. There's a whole alphabet on this stuff. I don't want to get going on it. It's the crystalline core. I'm including it just to remind you that all of that detailed work from the crystalline core is part of this discussion, maybe a major part of this discussion from reading Mike Eddy's passage. This is an interesting graphic in one of the new Dream Team papers that has 49 to 47.5, and then 47.5 to 45. Here's the Cooper Mountain Here's the Golden Horn. There's the Golden Horn and the Cooper Mountain that have shut off. So because Mike and others have such highly precise dates now from these plutons, they know that certain plutons were alive and hot, and they know when they get killed, and they know that there's some nearby plutons, the Railroad Creek and the Duncan Hill, that didn't exist here, but now they're showing up. So the main point is that even though I'm saying all these strike-slip faults are firing up at the same time, they're not. Because the newest data tells us that there was I guess this is the Ross Lake, that was dead by 47.5. And I think this is the Eniat, it is, that then's offset by the Straight Creek. You're hearing the main point, though. There needs to be a major Kula plate offshore to drive this. More maps. I don't even know where this one came from. Is this Hildebrand or is this Bob Miller? I should know, and I don't. The only reason I'm showing it is, remember, this is the Straight Creek Fault that is in northern Washington. And I noticed this 2 days ago. I'm like, what? Do you remember our Silesia suture? Our Silesia suture, our green line between Silesia to the west and Grello and the western Melange belt to the east? What the H is this? Get rid of this dock. Widely inferred eastern boundary of the Silesia basalt in the subsurface. Yeah, that's what we decided. We just talked to Megan Anderson a month ago. Inferred boundary of Silesia basalt from EarthScope data. What? I don't know what to do with that. But it's the Straight Creek that is the major right lateral offset fault in northern Washington. And the Straight Creek is also part of not only when the Kula needs to be offshore, but when we kill the Straight Creek Fault and what that must mean about the green M&M for Mike.
And that date, 49.33, whatever, plus or minus 0.007. Okay, yeah, very, very, we're talking to Mr. Precision. That does have regional significance. Are you kicking off the Straight Creek Fault precisely at that time?
Ooh, that is a good question. So the timing of the Straight Creek Fault is really challenging. It's very easy to know when a fault has finished because you'll have something that seals it. It's very hard to know its earliest motion because it gets erased by subsequent motion, whatever record of that was. Our argument for it starting around that time is that basically if we restore all the Mesozoic features, so the Cretaceous rocks that people want to restore along it, it also restores all these sedimentary rocks into like one big coherent sedimentary basin. And so our argument was that since that basin seems to be coherent up until about 49, that the Straight Creek Fault must have started moving at about that time or afterwards. And so our constraints are basically after 49 MA and finished by sometime in the latest Eocene, so like 35, 34 MA is when it gets sealed by intrusions up north.
The Chilliwack.
The Chilliwack, and then I just dated a sample for Bob from up in Canada that I believe is even a little older, so we might have a tighter bracket.
Okay, I don't want to get bogged down. In the crystalline core of the North Cascades, Straight Creek Fault, Eniat Fault, Ross Lake Fault Zone, we're teasing out detailed now dates for when each of these faults is active, but I don't want to lose you here. Let's remind ourselves that we're talking about this. We're still now in the weeds with these strike-slip faults in northern Washington. And one more time, it makes sense to most everybody that we need this while this is happening so dramatically. And then what Mike Eddy just mentioned is that he's fine with the green M&M getting way up here by 35 because that's when everything shuts down. And the Farallon offshore is not going to drive this dextral motion as much as when the Kula was here. But I also want to remind you that the only time we were talking about dikes before was my rather simplistic method of saying that to make these northeast-southwest trending dikes, this is almost like a biology class here, we need this kind of compression. But the new paper for today from Bob Miller and team says that you're going to get these dikes also with the dextral motion. The transtension is not only doing the strike slip motion, but it's opening the crust in these blocks that are in between. So we could put a bunch of dikes, a bunch of Eocene dikes in these blocks that are opening up at different times. So I don't know if I'm wrong saying the impact of Silesia opened up some of the dikes, but I think a more complete way to explain the family of all of these Eocene dikes in the North Cascades of Washington is tied to this radical dextral shifting that we have. I notice Jamie McDonald is in the live chat. Jamie, welcome. Viewers, you might remember Jamie from a month ago with some of those video clips. Jamie also has been working on a lot of this stuff. Great to have you here from Florida Gulf Coast University. Yeah, I think I want to wrap this portion up because we want to get to the global stuff. But here's some maps from Bob Miller. There's the Teanaway Dike Swarm. Here are these other swarms of dikes that have weirdly different orientations. Bob and team is plotting the orientation of the Teanaway basalt dikes. He's going fault by fault, Bob Miller and his colleagues. The Leavenworth Fault. I think these are all in the new paper that you have. A lot of detail here. I'm getting to this. Not a particularly sexy graphic, but I think it's important. If we take all the faults in the North Cascades, the Straight Creek Fault, the Leavenworth, the Eniat, the Ross Lake Fault Zone, and you go by age, and you ask which of these faults was active during this decade, during the 60s, only the Ross Lake. During the 50s, only the Ross Lake. During the 40s, 50 to 45, everybody fires up. 140 kilometers of total offset. And the faulting rate accelerates to the point of being ridiculous. And by 45 to 40, it's still cruising. That's why Mike Eddy wants the Kula off the coast of Washington until 40 at least. Do you have it now? Another way to show the same thing. Regionally, the oblique subduction and collision with Silesia gets these major strong dextral faults going, and many of them are active until 35. Near trench magmatism in Washington, near trench magmatism in Vancouver Island. Those are our two generations of bullet holes through Vancouver Island. Well, we've got it. We've got it. So all this stuff is happening between 60 and 40. All this stuff is happening between 60 and 40. The crazy Eocene. A full alphabet 3 winters ago. The crazy Eocene. We finished today by following up on what we've been teased with Mike Eddy, what we've been teased by Basil Tikoff and Karin Siglock and others. And my question has been, for the last few winters, Is all this stuff happening in the Pacific Northwest because of Silesia hitting us? Is this a local craziness? Or is this a global craziness around 50 million years ago? I asked Mike about that, and there's an extra long clip that I think does a really nice job of commenting on that. If you haven't seen the clip, I think you'll enjoy it. If you have seen the clip, maybe it's been a few weeks or maybe a couple months since you heard it. Let's go. Pacific Rim, Pacific Basin, a global reorganization of tectonic plates. Is that the reason we have all this crazy extension going on? Because, in the North Cascades alphabet, we kept saying everything's compression. All these flare-ups, these magmatic flare-ups in the North Cascades in the 90s and in the 70s. And then everything switches. Do you remember this? Everything switches. Slab window, question mark? This is, again, a while ago. But why do we go from the compression to the extension? Is it really just a local story? Not according to Mike Eddy and others who have been thinking about the entire Pacific Basin. This one's a little bit longer than normal, but I hope that you enjoy it.
Currently moving south, and then right around the time when all the interesting stuff happens in Washington, from my perspective,
right?
It turns around and goes the other way. And so this would be sort of the triple junction that we see now, just north of Vancouver Island, right? So that's still Farallon subducting. So that's the Farallon Pacific triple junction. So why would it suddenly yo-yo and move back the other way? And so this coincides with a fascinating thing that happened in the Pacific Basin. Let's see.
Oh, look at this. Yes.
Google Earth. So Hawaii's a hot spot, and we think that it basically you're building volcanic islands or edifices over that hot spot as the Pacific plate is moving over it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can track the Hawaiian seamount chain going back. And you can see here that sort of the dominant motion in the Pacific Basin along this segment was more east-west, and then it takes a big turn and it's more north-south, right?
Yep.
So this is the Emperor Sea Chain, this is the Hawaiian Sea Chain. We think it's one continuous manifestation of the Hawaiian plume, or hotspot, and right about there it bends. It makes a big change. This happened right around 50 MA, right? So there's a major change in plate vectors at the time of interest for us. And the reason for that is a bunch of subduction zones they initiated all at about the same time throughout the Pacific Basin. So the Aleutian arc, I think, I'm not totally up to date with the newest information there, but it jumped out to its current position around 50 MA. But more importantly, subduction starts right around 50 MA in the Isobonene Marianas arc.
Really?
The Tonga Kermadec arc. Yeah, all this stuff is like basically synchronous. So from as a geochronologist, I find this fascinating because like you look at the dates from these places and everything kind of lines up. So you're opening up new subduction zones. There's now new slab pull forces on these plates, and so their vectors, how they're moving, change.
Okay, I need you to stop your share again. This is big. I need to see your eyes now. Come on now. All right. So, okay, first thing. I've been teaching about that bend in the Hawaiian Emperor Seamount chain for my whole teaching career. I've always used the number 43 million years ago, which is probably a 35-year-old date that I've just used out of laziness. Is that 50 million year date in the bend a new-ish date? Is it controversial at all, or that's a pretty solid number now?
When I put together that figure, I looked into it and decided that that was uh, the good number, but I
Okay,
do not remember the details. So
sure.
someone might be able to respond negatively.
And on your figure, it was 48 to 49, um, but roughly 50. Well, that's, yeah. And then what was happening in those trenches on the opposite side of the Pacific before 50 million years ago? There was no subduction? Do we have a general cartoonish sense about why the subduction is starting 50 million years ago on the opposite side of the Pacific?
That is a fantastic question.
Thank you.
How you initiate subduction zones is, I think, one of the big remaining open questions in tectonics.
Wow.
There's sort of two ways that people think about it. After oceanic lithosphere has been around for 30, 40 million years, it is already denser than the underlying mantle. So it is ready to start to sink. But clearly this doesn't happen because we have oceanic crust that is older. And so there are two ways that people think this happens spontaneously, which is if you have old oceanic crust juxtaposed with other oceanic crust along, say, a transform fault, some lithospheric weakness, it just spontaneously begins to sink.
Mm-hmm.
The other way that people suggest is forced. So some shortening across some lithospheric weakness over thickens the oceanic lithosphere such that the lower plate gets to the point where eclogite develops and it begins to sink. There's another one that involves plumes. So a plume impinges, and that could also potentially trigger subduction. But it's a great question. Why would they all start at the same time?
Wow.
And in the same orientation? And so
Yeah.
if I can get a little hand wavy, because they're all the Marianas Isobonine, north-south, Tonga Kermadec, north-south. And so if you were to press me on this, and I don't think the people that study those arcs would agree, but if you were to press me, I would guess that something changed how the plates were moving. There was some compression in those areas, and that allowed some thickening and this forced initiation. And that's why they all have the same orientation, is you're putting some shortening across fracture zones that all were north-south in that basin.
Okay, so this leads us back to the Pacific Northwest, I think, because if we have slab pull causing these ocean plates to head that direction, we're extending the crust in the Pacific Northwest. Do you agree with Basil that, okay, now I'm going to deeply offend you. Do you agree with Basil that the accretion of Siletzia is a minor story compared to a global extension story happening about the same time?
Well, you put me on the spot. Spent like the last 10 years thinking about Siletzia.
Okay, yeah.
But I think Basil's point is that, like, a lot of what we see when Siletzia collides and these terrains are moving and that sort of thing, it is a consequence of what's happening in the wider Pacific Basin, right? I think since we live and work in Washington, we think that it's the center of the world, but there's a wider world out there
Right.
that's sort of influencing what's happening in Washington. So, it was a significant regional event, I think, and it had regional consequences. But, like, I don't think that Siletzia and the Yakutat terrains led to major changes throughout the Pacific Basin. They might be recording or influenced by these wider events.
Okay, well, I want to try something. Michael Eddy, Purdue University. That's as far wide as we're going to get to cast our crazy net. As much as the entire planet, or at least the northern hemisphere, that's fine. but it's an interesting perspective on the whole thing. And so when we look at a green M&M being migrating to the north and to the south and then the north, and a yo-yo and not a yo-yo, and looking at something like this where we have locally, back to Mike's classic diagram, where this unconformity tells us that our transpression then suddenly becomes transtension. Is it a global story to why we have that here in the Pacific Northwest? We're acknowledging that it may be a global story, but we're not doing a global alphabet, we're doing a Cascades alphabet. And so it's time to zero back in and wrap this up for today. We're setting the stage for the second half of the alphabet. And so I think it's this map from Jeff Tepper that's going to be our next place to go. And I thank Jeff yet again for being a whisperer for the directions we should be going. He's not really doing that, but I'm using him as a sounding board on how to then take the next couple of steps. And so this is one of the slides from the Jeff Tepper talk here in Ellensburg in November, and it's the blue where we go next. The blue are the earliest days of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. And I love that he had blue. I don't know, maybe I subliminally chose blue for the 40s because of this map. I can't remember. But I know very little about the Drunken Charlie Complex, the Northcraft Formation, the Tukwila Formation, the Mount Purchase Volcanics, the Youngs Creek Complex, the Hanson Lake Rhyolite, the Gobel Volcanics. But if I can find that, do I have it? Yeah, right here. We are, in the next couple of episodes, going to be visiting, I think, some of these very specific places. And if Lottie or Lindsay or Gary or a few other folks who specialize in detailed photos and maps from these areas, I would be happy to use some of them, because I think my gut is, as we start the second half of the alphabet next Thursday, I think I want to go back to local, almost roadside geology type stuff. Like, we've been out so wide and we've been into this competing or different tectonic models ideas, which has been a blast. But I think I want to go back to a little bit of, hey, you know that spot? You know the Issaquah Alps? Yeah, there's some stuff you drive by every frickin' morning on the way to work. And did you know that those are from the first few million years of the Cascade Volcanic Arc? And did you know that the Cascade Volcanic Arc had no elevation back then? And that these eruptions were happening submarine? I'm making this up now. And did you know that the chemistry of those are more similar to... I'm going to stop. I'm making stuff up. But there has been work done on some of these units. I think another way of saying where we're about to go, and you can get your questions ready, we're wrapping up today. I think another way I want to say where we're going to go, or I lost my thought. What was I going to say? Oh boy. Okay, I'm not sure that's true. Okay, I remember what I was going to say. I think we're maybe moving towards a bunch of units, map units, that haven't been looked at very much. I think I would have heard about it if there's been major study on some of these early Cascade units. So I think what I'm saying is I don't know if I'm almost sure we're not going to go into he said, she said, 3 different tectonic models for the Northcraft volcanics or whatever. And so I'm anticipating that our progress will be a little bit more fast-paced through the colors. Unless we stumble into another major story or two, I think we maybe have 1, maybe 2 more letters devoted to blue before we move on to the 30s. I don't know, but that's what I'm thinking. And so it's this kind of approach I don't know how we will do it, but I've got a few days to figure it out. That will be in the early days of the Cascades, which are interestingly west of the current Cascade volcanic arc. I think I have a good explanation for why it's not underneath the modern Cascades, but we'll save that. I think we're quitting it there, except let me just double check. Did I have anything else here? Oh, just revisiting the Jeff Tepper model where he likes the resurrection plate as part of this, but I think we've covered that to a degree. And these are the original OG slides that I remember from the poster in 2019. I think Jeff likes resurrection here on this 52 million year old map instead of Kula. But you'll notice that Jeff and Ken's green M&M is on the southern margin of Siletzi, and it is in southern Oregon. 52 million years ago. He just wants to get that green M&M up to the mouth of the Columbia at 49 and up into Washington 46, so that the Farallon can do the arc factory as opposed to the Kula. Yeah, it's leading edge of the slab. Well, this is how we'll finish. I think I have a video clip where I'm trying to struggle with the geometry of this leading edge of Jeff Tepper's Farallon plate. Let's do that. We'll finish with this. Forgot I had this. This is how we'll finish.
The whole slab is moving northward.
Yeah.
Or north. That's northeast. That's the sort of current vector. It is simultaneously rolling back because it was originally a flat slab and it is now steepening. So it is steepening from east to west, as your hand is doing right now.
Right.
But there's probably at its leading edge, it's also rolling back from north to south.
From north to south.
Yeah. So there's sort of it's a very geometrically hard to.
Yeah.
So I envision that there is a place where those rolling back edges achieved a great enough depth to begin normal arc magmatism, and that's somewhere in the blue zone there.
So it's almost a corkscrew, if I'm putting words in your mouth now. So it's not only in cross section this and finally getting deep enough. This stub is getting deep enough to start arc magmatism, but our head is dropping to the north as well, and so there's in the north-south cross section we'd see that same kind of dropping, I guess.
Right, because every edge of the slab is an unbounded, unsupported location, and so it's denser than the surrounding mantle, so it's going to be sinking, and if there's nothing to resist that, it's going to sink fastest at its edges. That's my view.
Very good. Okay. The black slide says, class dismissed. Thank you for joining this episode. It's time for some live question and answer. I'll give you a shout out the window. No, I won't. I'll give you a shout out the window. Oh, come on. I can do better than that. Hang on. Let's get some blue sky. We got people walking out there besides. Let's see if it's herky jerky. Is it herky jerky? A couple of characters. All right. Uppercase. Live questions, please. We'll try to answer a few before we wrap this one up. Lottie, is there paleomag data for the Baranof Island that could clarify the triple junction migration story? Not sure. Thank you. I know Merle was doing a bunch. I don't know. Jeff, does the India collision play into the Pacific rearranged plates? Sure, why not? There's going to be a bunch of questions. I have nothing intelligent to say, but I'll read them anyway. Baba Yoshi, will we discuss where the coastline is for the early Cascades? Or is it erupting underwater? Yes, we will. Ron, how do we reconcile the known track of the Yellowstone across northern Nevada and southern Idaho with known clockwise rotation? Where was the hot spot? I think we've tried to comment on that. That Pal Hammond, map was the latest attempt to try to show that. So I think we've been at that, Ron, for a little while. I don't know if you missed an episode or somehow it didn't work for you. Eric, no, that's not uppercase. Chris, do we have first-generation Cascade? I like that, first generation. Do we have first-generation Cascade volcano remnants that have moved north, mostly? Have any of those been identified, like ghost volcanoes, exhumed calderas, etc.? Interesting. Because of the clockwise rotation, Chris? Yes, I'll emphasize that again, that we have an ongoing clockwise rotation, 1 degree every 1 million years throughout the entire history of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. That's real. That's not just an idea. But if the entire arc is rotating north, then I'm not sure why it matters. Do you kind of know what I mean? Like, as I imagine it, the arc is every volcano in the Cascade Volcanic Arc is an equal distance from the pivot point over by Orofino, Idaho. So if the whole thing's rotating, I'm not sure why we should consider the rotation. Like, will we be talking about the rotation a bunch? Oh, okay. I got one angle for the rotation next time. Can the pole flip affect the movement of the crust? Thanks for the question. Does not apply here. There have been magnetic reversals throughout the history of our planet. They're frequent enough that the timing of those flips needs to be addressed first of all, before we speculate on any magnetic flips. So it's something that usually comes up, but we need to know the timing of that first, and that timing is well known. That would be the first step. David, dextral north of moving triple junction implies sinistral south of it? Oh, I don't think so, David, because those maps show both the Kula and the Farallon have a northward vector. And you're like, I don't see how that's possible. How can you have a spreading ridge, but both plates are heading north, essentially? And I had the same question until I've kind of zoomed out and seen some of the reconstructions of the spreading ridges. As you follow the spreading ridge from segment to segment, there's different orientations of the ridges. And they're all contributing to the same plate. So no, I don't think anybody's talking about left lateral offset if we're south of the spreading ridge, but maybe I'm missing that somehow. Kirk, there has to be some time delay on plate action in the west to the movement in the east. Time delay on plate action in the west to movement in the east. Not sure what you're talking about there. Siskiyou Star, would slab breakoff magma versus Yellowstone hotspot magma have similar chemistries? Similar, but I think there are some significant differences that are tough to tease out. Otherwise, I think maybe that would have been done by now. Thank you for the question. All I know is that if there's a bunch of helium or something, that's a vote for mantle plume. But I think both Jeff and Mike would be the first to tell you that the geochemist, and Jamie would be the first to tell you that it's easier to say there's a slab missing versus a slab there. And it's harder to then say we have a slab window. Well, then is it mantle plume without a slab window, or is it break off without a slab, or is it spreading ridge without a slab? I think that's where we are. It's harder to put that together. Eddie from Three Dog Night, could the draining of the Western Seaway and the basins contribute to the detrital component of the strike-slip faults as well as the rotation? If you're talking about the Western Seaway over where the Rockies are today, Eddie, I don't see a connection except that there are some Eocene sedimentary basins that have been regionally correlated across the West because there are not major mountain ranges like we have today. But beyond that, I don't see a reason to go that far. Joy to the world. Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Jeff, does the... Oh, I already read that one. Down to live. I'm looking for 3 more and we're done. Slow life. Could the strike slip faults in eastern Oregon be like the coin purse faults in Washington? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah, there could be more... Right, Silesia impacted down there as well. But I think what I tried to allude to today is that my coin purse, I like it. I think it's real, but I don't think that's the only reason we have the dikes. The dikes are also tensional because of this massive amounts of strike slip faulting and trans-tension, which has been drilled into my skull after working with the North Cascades Dream Team. MC, it's interesting to see near-trench magmas form a line perpendicular to the spreading ridge. Seems like this says something about the dip of the plate being steep. Near-trench magmas form a line perpendicular. Thanks. I think, Jeff, I think Mike Eddy is saying they're perpendicular to a line because the spreading ridge is moving. I think maybe Jeff is saying that too. Lottie, does Mike Eddy's model require anomalous magmas in the Cascades as the triple junction passes? Does subduction take a break between Kula and Farallon? Okay, well that's how we'll finish. That's interesting. I will enjoy watching the replay when the comments appear to see if you like this as much as I do. But I think what Lottie just asked is 2 things. I think Lottie, you asked, are the near trench magmas always here? Or can you have near trench magmas in the volcanic arc itself? And I think the answer is we're not expecting the near trench magmas to be in the arc, because by definition, if the trench is out here, because Silesia has been accreted, then the near trench magma, let's make up a number, the near trench magma has to be within 75 miles of the actual trench. I think that's the going thought. I'm hesitating because frickin', Pilchuck is like almost in the arc, but whatever. And then Lottie's other question was, if we are transitioning, if we are thinking about Mike Eddy, the Oregon Cascades and this is a brand new thought. We have the Oregon volcanic arc. We have the Washington volcanic arc. In Washington, we want these starting at 46. Jeff Tepper, you're still with us? If Jeff Tepper's still with us and Jeff Tepper wants the green M&M down here 50, or 52, let's say, then, Jeff, do you want the Oregon arc to start before the Washington arc? Because, Jeff, aren't you saying that you want the Farallon responsible for the arc, period? And so, even though we don't have this is really interesting. How come I hadn't thought about this before? Okay, right before we quit, I have a brand new thought. Jeff, do you visualize with your model that as we bring the leading edge of the Farallon plate north, 52, 51, 50, 49, 48, 47, 46, 45, 44, 43, do you imagine the Cascade Volcanic Arc starting down here, 52, 51, etc.? Is that what you're imagining? And then we just don't have those rocks to look at today? We just happen to have them up here? Slab was too flat, Jeff. Slab was too flat. Oh, that's why the corkscrew is important. Right. Thought I had something there, but you're right. That's part of your model. Head dropping to the north. A toast to you. Thank you for watching this episode called Ridge Migration Again. Chris Carter says, have a great day, everybody. Ditto. Same. I have the same message. Have a great day, everybody. If you live in Eastern Washington, we have, well, come on, the blue skies are just, they're too good. I'm going to give you another shot. I'm just going to go here. Look at that. I haven't had that in a long, long time. Here's to your health in early January of 2025. If you're struggling with your health, let's hope for improvement. If you are enjoying good health, let's hope and pray that it continues. Thanks to Jason McClowery, Mike Eddy, and Jeff Tepper, and many others for contributing to the content in this ongoing alphabet series. Okay, so I got a few days off from you. I've got some things going on that are not related to the alphabet. But I'll find some time in the next 5 days to drill down. And Jamie McDonald, if you're still with us, I think we should probably do a visit, another recorded visit about some of those units that you've been working on in addition to Jeff. Okay, everybody. Thank you. I love you. And we'll see you next on Thursday, January 16th at noon Pacific time. Have a good day, everybody. Campus cop. Oh, these campus cops, all they know is that nobody works except for that one geology guy in his office. They're like, suspicious suspect broken into the geology building. They're like, nah, he's always there. He's fine. Like, why is he talking to himself on Saturday morning at 9:30? Let's punch in. All right. I'm working. I belong here. It's okay. Look at that. All right. This is the last look at me before I get handcuffed for being in a university building during weekend hours. Goodbye. End stream.